Yeah, we're live. It's your morning motivation, but it's actually the afternoon. But don't worry, I will be back at 7. But I got a lot of stuff to talk about. So we want to get in a couple today. And today we're talking about the Bonneville Civic. So I want to talk not particularly about this vehicle, but more about the gearing in the transmission, in the rear end. In this case, it also works with tire size, or it also employs tire size. And the reason that I want to talk about it is because we had to be very specific. And I'm going to show you guys actually a dyno curve of the motor when we ran one of the many, many times that we ran it on the chassis dyno. I'm going to show you that. So I'll show you power curves of when we ran on the chassis dyno at Westech. And I'm going to show you, I'll be able to tell you exactly what I'm talking about, but it'll be much easier for you guys to understand what I'm going over if you can see the power curve, because then you can go, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense when we're choosing gearing. So we'll talk a little bit about, obviously we were trying to go very, very fast in this car. Bonneville, the idea, if you don't know about Bonneville, is to go as fast as you can. They have a little history on Bonneville. They have two different courses. They have a 3-mile course and they have a 5-mile course. And then if you're going slow, reasonably slow, you go on the short course, which is 3 miles. And then if you get to where you're going more than 175 miles an hour on the short course, then you can move over to the long course. And then all of the really big speeds, all the things that you read about, like Speed Demon and all of these, what are they called? What is Speed Demon? All of the super fast cars. It'll come to me in a minute. Not Lakesters, Streamliners. All the Streamliners that go really, really fast are out there, Mickey Thompson and all that stuff. So all these cars that are going between 4 and trying to go 500 miles an hour, piston-driven deals, they're all out there too, and they're all going on the long course. So you got to go a certain speed to be able to do that. We were trying to get this. The Civic previously had gone over 200 miles an hour. We had done a bunch of things with guys from the magazines with Sam Matani. So shout out to Sam out there who got to drive this. He went 207 or something like that. And before that, I had gone over 200 on it, have a 200 mile an hour hat, which is very, very cool. But we were trying to get it to go fast. And so one of the things that I wanted to do personally, and this is a lot of guys go about this differently, but what I like to do is, since we wanted to go fast, obviously you can see air dams, we've blocked everything off. We've got a spoiler on the back. This thing had a full belly pan. It had all of the aero mods that were allowed in this is blown gas comp coupe. We also ran it in other classes as well. But it had a turbo sub 2 liter. It was an 84 millimeter by 89 millimeter combination. And we'd run a couple of different ones. We'd run a dart block, which was the dart stuff was really, really great. And then we also ran a sleeved GSR block, and it had a ported head. And in fact, we ran a dart head, which is basically a ported GSR head. We ran skunk cams in it and different intake manifolds. It's fairly easy to make the kind of power that we needed. In fact, we made 728 or something like that is the most I did on an engine dyno. On a hero run, when you're running 3-bar, you're running 29 pounds. We didn't run anywhere near that at Bonneville. We only ran about 17 pounds when it was making lots and lots of power, and it went, more than fast enough. So we could have gone lots faster. Just like everybody at Bonneville, there's more left. Everybody says that in their combinations and their drag racing, and especially at Bonneville, there's more left in it. In this case, the axle came separated from the transmission at the 4-mile marker. So we had another mile to run. It was still charging very hard. And then we had a similar thing happen. The second axle, because we put in a new one thinking that the axle was bad. And what happens is it just popped out of the clip. And we should have kept that one in there because that one had been run in. And by that, I mean, it had been used extensively for years and years and years on this car, on the Del Sol that I road raced. I mean, it was just a used axle. We put good grease in it, and we also put the zip ties around the bellows, the CV joint, boots, so that they wouldn't balloon up at speed, which they will do. Even on the dyno, they'll do that. So we did all that, and we had run it, and they had worked really, really well. And we had replaced it when we set the record, went into impound, and we're like, look, this thing came out, and I had to pull the chute and got all crazy and stuff. And so it kind of saved it, but it was problematic. So we in fact, we thought that the motor broke because it came out and lost drive on the first one and then got all crazy on the second one. But on the first one, it lost drive. I thought, oh, great. We just blew the motor up or whatever. Luckily, it had a rev limiter on it because when it comes uncoupled and you're at full throttle, that's obviously not good. But the motor was not a problem at all. But the other axle ended up breaking because it had no break in at all. It was just like off the shelf from the auto parts store. We stuck it in, went out and ran it, and went 227 miles an hour. And it's like, dude, we're not designed for this. We're designed for a little Honda Civic that's not doing this. But the thing that we had to do as much as anything to get this to go the speed that we wanted is I don't like to run a lot of engine speed. So I think excessive engine speed is bad. The higher that you run the motor, the more chance you have for problems. That's my opinion. Less engine speed is better. So I wanted to definitely keep this thing under 9,000 and actually under 8,500. We know the B series will run at that engine speed and will certainly run 8,000 all day long. I know because I ran in the Motorola Cup driving the Del Sol, and we would spend hours shifting at 8,000 RPM. So it's not a problem running at that engine speed. But the problem is, and here's the thing, the gearing in the car, this had it had a really one modification, but otherwise was an Integra LS GS kind of transmission, which meant it had a 0.96 fourth gear and a 0.714 fifth gear, which is a big split in between gears. Now, we also on this transmission had Liberty Gear make us a 4.0 final drive because we didn't care about acceleration. All we cared about is being able to reach the speed. And after doing all the calculations with our 26-inch tall tire, the final drive, and then the overdrive in fourth and fifth gear, we figured out how fast, how much RPM we needed to run the certain speed. And then obviously you have to factor in tire slippage on the Salt because there is a little bit of tire slippage. Not a lot in the case of our front wheel drive car. In fact, it calculated out within 100 RPM. So it was very, 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 very minimal. And a lot of guys talk about that. Oh, there's 30% tire slip. And I'm like, there was not 30%. If there were 30% tire slippage out there at Bonneville, we wouldn't have been able to go anywhere near our speed, but we did. And it all calculated almost exactly right. But the problem we had is that with roughly a 26% drop between fourth and fifth gear, that was over 2,000 RPM, meaning if we shifted at 8,000 RPM, we'd be back down at 6,000 RPM. I'm going to go and show you I'll show you guys the power curve here. We'll take our camera off so you can see. Hopefully you guys can see that. I can't really tell because I can't see what the camera is seeing. Let me see here. So we can see what I want you to look at is if we're out here at 8,000, see right there, and we shift, we're back down here at 6,000. So instead of being over 500 at the tire, in this case, at this boost level, so we would be at, let's say, 516 at the tire, we shift to 6,000, we're down at 379 at the tire. So you can see the problem here. The problem is in fourth gear, 379 horsepower, this thing is going 165 or 6 miles an hour, and it needs to pull from 160 something miles an hour out to 227 something miles an hour out there. And while out here, where it's making over 500 horsepower, that's not a problem. That's more than enough power and you guys can take a look and you can kind of see the torque curve. Out there where it's making 500 at the tire, that's actually more than enough to go the speed that it needs to go. So the problem isn't like going the speed. It isn't making the power that's required to go the speed. That's actually very easy. But the problem was when we shift from fourth gear to fifth gear, we have this huge drop in power production because of the drop in RPM. Now we could, there are ways to cure that. We could run a lot more boost there, but we didn't want to do that. So what we did to counteract this, it was, it's not hard to fathom. All we did was extend the shift point in fourth gear only, because in all the other gears, we could not put power down. So in fourth gear, it's like if you tried to mash the throttle, you'd just sit there and spin the tires and bounce off the rev limiter. I've seen guys do that, and it's not recommended. That's how you break your motor. There's no reason to do that. So it's just like, in fact, I don't even think I went into boost at all in first or second gear. All I did was roll out and get RPM. So it's part throttle in first, all the way out to 8,000, part throttle in second, all the way out to 8,000, part throttle in third. And in third, you could start getting into boost a little bit, but not anywhere near full throttle. When I'm saying you could get into boost, you could get 2 or 3 pounds and just get and feel the thing like start to move. And all you're trying to do is get like vehicle speed and RPM. The critical thing happens after you shift out of third into fourth, and you can start rolling on the throttle. You have more vehicle speed. You start having some downforce. You start having a little bit more traction, and then you can start rolling into the throttle, and then you can actually get to full throttle where you're making all of that power, because obviously at part throttle, you're not making that power. At full throttle, you're making the power, and then the thing really starts moving, and then it all really happens in fifth gear. So it's the drop from, it would normally be the drop from 8,000 to 6,000. But if we extend the shift RPM in fourth gear out to, we did it out to 8,600. So if I extend it out to 86 or 8,700, that puts us in a little bit better position. Because as we saw in our curve, if we could raise that by 700 RPM, instead of making 379 horsepower, we are making 434. So now it's a much more favorable position, and then it has no problem climbing up. And obviously, all of these are all designed to be post VTEC. So we're already on the secondary cams on this thing. The turbo was a 72 millimeter. We had an air to water intercooler. It had ice water. We weren't running E85, oddly enough. We were running race gas in it. And we also ran in a fuel class where we could have run E85 and it would have been even more beneficial. But we had falling charge temperatures while we were making the run because we have a big 10-gallon cell of ice water. So all of that stuff was taken care of with the motor. The car had fairly good aero. It had enough gearing. And then by doing this and curing the gear split, we were able to get the thing so that it would, it tracks fairly nice, but get it so that it would have enough power when we did the shift from fourth to fifth, that it would pull up from this higher speed. Because the other thing you don't want to do, and this turned out not to be a problem with us, but it is a problem on the short course, because if you have a car that's going fast and you're having trouble putting power down, you have a limited amount of real estate to make that happen. So you have to not only go fast, but you have to accelerate up fairly fast so that you could have that all done in 3 miles. On the long course, wasn't nearly as much of a problem. We had plenty of room to run. In fact, we didn't even use a full mile of what we could have because of our axle issue. But that's the important thing of the gearing. And then you can do the same thing when you're doing gear splits and you're doing your combination of rear end gear, tire size, engine speed, and then desired or dreamed about mile an hour when you're going through the lights, obviously. So you can figure that out for drag racing too. And that's some pretty important math. I have an auto math book that I have that gives you all of the calculations for that. And Wallace Racing has all of that stuff. So if you're running your Turbo LS at 7,000 RPM, you can figure out what speed you could run based on your mile an hour and based on your tire size and your gearing, your rear end gearing, your transmission gearing. You could figure out what kind of power you can run. And then you can also figure out other things which are cool. You can figure out, should I hold a gear and not do the shift, because then you have, better average power production. There's lots of cool stuff that it can tell you. And road racers will tell you, yeah, sometimes we alter the gearing either in the trans or in the rear end so that we can stay in one gear until we reach a certain corner and then be able to go around the corner. And then that's beneficial rather than have to shift 50 or 100 feet before it's time for you to brake and do it. Then you got a lot going on and you're not accelerating the way that you should. So optimizing the gearing for these kinds of combinations for whether it's for Bonneville or drag racing, or if you're doing drifting or stuff. I'm sure that helps too. I don't have a lot of experience with drifting, so I haven't gone through any data logging to see what it is they need and where they need it, but I'm sure that that's possible. So let's see what you guys have going on. So we're going to scroll back. I think we can go right to live chat. Yes, we can. The secret people. Richard, you'd love driving the Kershaw track. Where's that at? Guyana's in the house, man. That's very cool. Was it the Salt Flats? It's a lake bed right now. All the snow is melted. Yeah, I drove by there when I went out to see the guys at the car farm out in Ohio, and it was a lake. Did you lighten the front fenders so the front of the car is a half-inch wider than the back on each side? This will aid in slipstreaming. I hope everyone is doing well. Did we lighten the front fenders or lower the front fenders? Widening the front fenders would increase frontal area. Francisco's in the house. I had a friend who put a second transmission behind the first one, and his truck would idle at 70 miles an hour in top gear. Getaway, so you'll be back later? Cool, man. We'll be here tonight. That's the very reason I like the 4LE, because it stays between 5,000 and 6,000 RPM on power the whole time. Yeah, if you have the gear split right, and that's the benefit of having multi-gear transmissions. Is obviously if you have one gear, it has to have a really broad range. You have to have a lot of power, and then if you have two, like a power glide, then you have to have a broader power band. And as you narrow that up with gearing, the number of gears that you have, 3-speed, 4-speed, 5-speed, 6, 7, 8, 10. Now it's ridiculous. The number of gears that they have, then you can have a very, very peaky motor, and you could keep it in that peak. Formula One's a pretty good example of that. And so you can have lots and lots of gears to choose from and always be in what could be a very narrow power band. Deeper gears are only relevant if you have traction. Yeah, if you don't have traction, putting more gear in it, unless you can improve the traction situation. What did you run for tires back then, and what would you do differently? What I would do differently is I would now change the gearing in the transmission, which is now possible. It wasn't really commercially. I mean, we had to have a custom final drive done when we did it from the guys at Liberty Gear. That car needs to be lowered. It needs to have smaller tires on it, but we were using the tires for gearing so we wouldn't run RPM. And then I would really like to lower it, put smaller tires on it, change the gearing so we could still have the same RPM range. And then I'd like to run this thing at 20 pounds and see what happens. I think the thing would go really fast. But I would want to put more cage in it. 256 rear diff in my Firebird. Yeah, I ran a 241 in my Mustang one year because we wanted to, for the Silver State, because I wanted to keep it in fourth gear. And it was some weird diff that came in a 3-speed trans van or truck or something. And Dennis Hilliard from Central Coast Mustang told me about it. Did you have an LSD in the Civic? No, it was an open diff. It was much better like that. Guys had tried various different kinds. The Type R limited slip. They tried CAS, what I used in the Del Sol when we were road racing. That worked very well as long as you broke it in properly. but they had tried various limited slips, and that wasn't good. The car seemed to like wander around with the open diff. As long as you weren't, as long as you could manage the traction, which again, I don't care about what's happening right off the right off the get-go. Some guys are so like hyped up, they think it's a drag race. They're like, wah, 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 wah. We're like, look, you're already in fourth gear and you've moved about 70 feet. You need to relax. There's a lot of room to go. Just have it roll out and start going. I mean, but I don't know, they're kids. I saw you talk to SEMA with TCI on the 460 and their valve body. You saw me talk at SEMA? I wasn't at SEMA this year, so that wasn't me. The only time I came close to the wall, I snapped an axle and the wheel and the axle popped out. Yeah, that's not good. Richard, I'm looking at running a 5.3 with a 6762, hoping for 1,000 horsepower. And you don't use the word thoughts in your question. Just eliminate that from your discussion. I don't know if a 67 will do 1,000 horsepower at the tire. If you're using two of them. Okay, I was going to say, if you're doing twins, that's doable. But a single one is not going to do it. Yeah, twins, that's not a problem at all. X-Pipe for the win. Thanks for the advance or the advice. 85 F-150, 351, mild cam, long tubes, 2.5-inch exhaust, glass packs, 4-speed. There you go. A Honda front-wheel drive trans, you cannot change the chain. What is chain case gearing, Dave? Yeah, the cage that's in there, I would just want more. I'd want it to be like a like a top fuel cage. We don't have a locked limited slip in this transmission. Oh, Sean, in 2014. Okay. Don, this car went 227, so that's the fastest I went at Bonneville. Hey guys, street tuning timing on a boosted 5.3 sloppy stage 2 cam, is it the same as pump gas tuning? You just run more timing and top out at 20 degrees at the top. Do you have, when you say pump gas, is that E85 or is that like 91? You shouldn't be running, I don't know how much boost you're running, but 20 degrees would be a lot of timing. Comcam has you at SEMA with the TCI 2014 video up. Oh, okay. I did a lot of interviews back then for the guys at Acceleration Media. Acceleration Media. My favorite thing with these kinds of cars are the Bonneville moons. They just look cool. You have a chain running from the converter to the trans body. This is not if it's not an automatic, we don't have automatics in these. We have manual transmissions in these. We would never run an automatic in a car like that. That's the one thing that I don't like. Although I did buy lots of engines that were originally in automatics, a lot of our race motors for our U.S. touring car stuff, and for this car as well, a lot of them that we bought, these JDM things, were originally automatics, but I wouldn't ever use those transmissions. Only manuals. What goes from the clutch to the trans? The input shaft? I'm asking 20 degrees on E85, but is the process the same as tuning pump gas 91 on the street? I don't know what you mean. Is the process the same? You would be changing timing and air fuel on the street the same way that you would on the chassis dyno on pump gas. The transmission I'm running is a 5-speed Acura Integra LSGS. And we changed the ring and pinion, and wish I would have changed the intermediate gears, mostly fourth and fifth. Yeah, there's no chains in them. Haven't taken them apart. We know there's no chains in them. So sometimes when you break them, it sounds like there's chains rattling around in there, but otherwise not so much. Yeah, your tuning process for the E85 for street tuning is the same. Keep it out of knock, retard timing under boost. Had an 87 Integra rated at 113 horsepower, 1600 cc's. What was the PC? First gen. Yeah, it was a ZC. Okay. Bear, 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 bear. Well, you could get the ZC either carbureted or injected. I didn't realize that they had them carbureted. I just have never looked back that far, though. Jerry, you just chose a cam for your stock LM7, 227, 239, 108. That'll have some chop if that's what you want. How much would you gain in mile an hour with a fourth and fifth gear change? Well, it depends on what RPM you're running to, but we would shift at 8,600 in fourth gear, and it'd go from 168 to 227, I think. Do I plan to visit the Atlas? Yes, the 4200. Definitely going to make some more runs on that. Casey, 229, 242 on an L92. I've run cams like that in an L92. They work good. And an LS3 and all those. They work good. Yeah, Shatter. The speed that you can run depends on a lot of things. I have and this is the way that it always goes. You're talking about like real Bonneville guys. You're like, yeah, this car did good. It went 227. And they're like, yeah, I had my Civic on the freeway, man. I was only at 3/4 throttle and it was going 160 or whatever. I'm like, no, it really wasn't. Maybe your speedometer said that. And maybe you're only at part throttle, but you weren't going that fast, because they won't go that fast. I know. We've tried to make them go that fast a lot, and we've had concerted efforts in trying to do that. Yeah, we do run lots of tire pressure, because those are the tires that we use at Bonneville and the Civic are basically front runners, which are the front tires for top fuel cars. Java's out. Well, a T5 from an S10. What S10 what motor did the S10 have? Did it have a 4.3 liter? If it had a 4.3 liter, that should bolt up, right? Richard, do you still have your Fox body? Yes. If so, what's the current drive line? It doesn't have anything. It doesn't have an engine or transmission in it right now. There's also aero limits to speed. Yeah, and that all of that is the gearing that you're using is only going to put you, if you can get the horsepower peak to occur at the at the peak vehicle speed where the maximum amount of aero resistance will be, then you've done your homework. And that's what we were trying to do. That's why I like the math part of what's going on at Bonneville. That's very important. But again, also you have to step back and go, well, if we have 8,500 RPM and we have our maximum, the nice thing about a turbo torque curve is it doesn't happen at 1 RPM. It happens like we made 518 for like 1,000 RPM. So it was pretty nice to be in that range. And as long as you have more power than you have aerodynamic resistance, even with making the same power, it will continue to accelerate. But that's the thing, is you have aero drag, and really all of it is aero drag. Very little of it, when you're going that speed, very little of it is weight or anything. Do you have to change all the gaskets when you open up an LS engine? I replace the head gaskets. Otherwise, no. Everything else I reuse. Reuse the rings, bearings, all that stuff. Want to use the original trans from the 2.8 S10 when V8 swapping? Maybe the trans will work. Somebody might be able to answer that, but the bell housing I don't think is going to work. That the 2.8 liter is going to be like the V6 trans, the bell housing anyway. Turbo Center, I found a place you can grind my cam. 4,000 maximum grind. Make any difference? My MR20 stock is 232, 220. That's probably not a 50 number. That's probably a 4 or 6 number. 370 lift. I don't know what is it 400 lift is the maximum lift that you're talking about? Normally they can change 30, 40 thousandths of lift. And then a lot of times they can get between 15 and 20 degrees of duration, maybe 15. And that will help. And if your intake and exhaust cam are the same, they're probably not going to be. I'd like to see the thing have more exhaust duration. Have you heard of the Super Duty 4-cylinders that powered the Pontiac Fiero race cars? Yeah, I have a book on the buildup of those motors. Richard, I'm running a 496 stroker, Eagle, comp hydraulic roller. 10-1. Do you see a problem if you run twin turbos or a Pro Charger? If it's 10-1 and you have head studs and everything on it, and you have ring gap in it, you should be able to run boost on it. Picture an upside down boat. The only thing you want to change on the boat is the back of it. The back of an upside down boat. To the shakedown run of the 6L90, shifting fine, very cool. Shatter, is there anything specific about a modern LT4 that I should be proactive about? If you want to last a long time, you should just change the oil regularly. And actually running water meth injection on it every once in a while would be a good idea, because it'll clean the valves too. Is there any way to get power out of an Iron Duke aside from changing the engine? Yes, the every motor responds to the same thing. You can do a ported head, you can do cams, you can ask Racer D. He's got one that he's run a bunch of stuff on. But a ported head, cams work, intake manifold work, boost obviously works. Dave, the hydroplane guys are still using those Super Duty parts? Shatter, if you're running Redline Oil is good stuff. I really like the guys there. Yeah, take a look at Dave's video on if you're interested in Iron Duke stuff. Take a look at his video. It's cool stuff. Coo. When you did Bonneville was traction an issue at higher speeds? No, not really. It was when the when the axle popped out. But otherwise, no. Driving a front wheel drive car at Bonneville is much better than driving a rear wheel drive car. If you're trying to drive a rear wheel drive car at Bonneville, a Camaro or Mustang or something like that, especially one that has lots of power, because let's face it, having 1,000 horsepower in some sort of F body or Mustang or whatever, pretty easy to do. So putting that kind of power down in a rear wheel drive car, very, very difficult. The back end wants to pass the front end. In a front wheel drive car, the dart is going with the heavy side first, and it works. It has the engine is over the drive wheels. There's traction. The back end's not trying to pass the front end. But with a rear wheel drive car, it's like throwing a dart feathers first, and it wants to turn around. Daryl, did you like the 241 gears? I didn't. Only because to use fifth gear in that car required 90 miles an hour. I was using that 274 cam, and it was not happy running down the road at like 1,000 RPM in fifth gear. And I could have run in fourth gear, but when I was driving out there, I'm talking about when we were doing the race, it turns out that it was running more RPM than I wanted to run during the race anyways. Any recommendations on a supercharger for a Gen 3 6-liter LS and an off-road truck that sees street occasionally? I think for that, I probably would put a positive displacement blower on it. So a Magnuson, one of these adapter kit LSA blowers, that kind of thing. Kenny Bell, any of those would work really well. Yeah, Dave, let me know if you get that stroker together. Let me know. Snow tires work on the salt or mud tires even? No, not for the speed that you're trying to run. The problem is that that's why we run these top fuel tires, is because you've got so much tire speed that it'll disintegrate tires like that. The tires have to be, very, very high speed rated, and that's why we run those. And also, you want to minimize. You don't want to have you. I want to say this. You want to minimize traction. You don't want to minimize traction. You want to minimize aerodynamic drag, and you also want to minimize rolling resistance. And that's why everybody uses these tires. In Bonneville stuff, I've always wondered, do you see lots of lateral movement? No. In fact, a lot of guys have almost no suspension on these cars. They just want it to go straight. Are you doing any more stuff on the K series? Yeah, I have a K24 we're doing stuff on. What kind of stall converter would you suggest for a 4L80 with intention of putting a turbo in it? That's really going to be a function of your camshaft that you choose. The turbo is going to, if it's spooled down where if it's creating boost down where the stall speed is, it's going to raise the stall speed anyway. But if you have lots of camshaft in it, you may want more converter. And I don't know what you're doing with it. If you're driving it around, if you're drag racing it, whatever. Who will go 500 first? I think both of those cars have the ability to do it. I just think that they need the right circumstance, and they just need traction, basically. Going to Kenny Bell on my O2 Mustang, think of doing a 5-liter stroker kit. It'll help, but I don't know you need to go to that expense since turning the boost up is so much easier than spending the money on. If you're buying forged stuff anyway, and you're going to get the stroker stuff, and it's not that much more than just getting the forged stuff, then you can do that. The thing I'm worried about is I'm worried about the strength of the stroker stuff versus the regular forged 4.6 stuff. But the camshaft definitely, yes. Speed. You got a Pertronix. Is your Pertronix an HEI based distributor? If it is, it's not unusual at all for HEIs to have way too much centrifugal advance. We usually have to put stops on them to stop them from advancing too much. That way you can get some sort of realistic combination of, because a lot of guys have to take all the static timing out of them, all the initial out of them, because they have too much centrifugal. So the key is to limit the amount of centrifugal. That way you can put like initial advance in, and then the thing will start and idle and drive, and then we'll have the right amount of total advance. How safe are lash gaps at higher RPM? The SR20s, I think they had issues with pitching. I don't think it was lash gaps. I think it was the rockers on those, but they were trying to rev them pretty high. Lash gaps shouldn't be a problem. I don't know how high you're revving it, but that shouldn't be a problem. Michael, I don't know about the transmissions in the 2 different years, the 06s. I haven't researched any of that. Should factory rod, main, or head bolts be used during a full machining rebuild? When we put motors together from the wrecking yard, I reuse all of that. Not the head bolts normally. If I'm running boost, I'll usually put head studs in it, but all of the bottom end stuff gets reused. Have you ever tuned the small block Chevy 290 horsepower crate motor? I think we have. I don't know what carburetor you have on that. I don't know. What we do for the tuning, at least on the engine dyno, is, and this is what Brule does, is we'll dial in, we'll keep timing out of it. We'll do this whether it's fuel injected or carbureted. We will not run very much timing in it. Then we'll dial in the air fuel, and then we'll dial in the timing. So on the distributor with a carburetor on it, we'll take timing out of it just by turning the distributor. A lot of times we'd like to run lock distributors, but if we're doing it so that it needs to drive around, we will, if like on the HEA, like I said, I put a stop in it to limit the total amount of advance, or limit the amount of centrifugal advance, so we can get some sort of reasonable combination. We know that it's a small block Chevy and it's going to want to run somewhere in the 36-degree range, let's say. Maybe it wants a little more, maybe it wants a little less, depending on what head is on it, but it's going to be in that range. So we'll put that so that it starts and runs and does the things that we want it to do. And then we go out, and the first thing we adjust is the idle set screws. And so we will adjust, and if it's got 4 corner idles, we'll do all 4 of them. It's easy just to look. I mean, you can hear it with the change in RPM, but we just look at the air fuel and then combine that with how is the motor reacting? Does it like it? Does it not like it? And then once you get the idle mixture set, then you can set the stop for the throttle linkage, because obviously you could screw that up and bring the idle up, and you can do all that. Then we will go into, does the thing take throttle? Do we need to do anything with accelerator pumps? Do we need to do anything with power valves and stuff? And so we'll look at all that stuff, and we'll just have the dyno, using the dyno, we'll create transition circuitry times and stuff and get all that dialed in. If we have to take the bowls off, it's a Holly, we'll do jetting on it to see if we can get, and then we'll get the right combination of We try to get the same amount of fuel flow front and back on the carburetor. So, but if we can't do that based on one of them having a power valve and one of them not, based on the way that that particular motor, the way that that thing wants to drive, whether it's in a jet boat or a prop boat or a vehicle or car on the street, a car or truck on the street, we'll get the thing so that it rolls in nice, it transitions, it's snappy, it has the right air fuel on the primary side, it has good fuel flow, primary and secondary side, and it just takes a little bit of work. It's much easier on the dyno, obviously, than it is to do it by ear or whatever. If you have an air fuel meter, it makes life a lot easier. 53 stock stall, which Truck Norris cam kit? I think that they only have one, right? No, they have the Truck Norris, they have the no springs required and then the springs required. Brian says most people buy the springs required Truck Norris cam, but you can get the lower lift version as well. Are LS3 heads worth doing a CNC port if running a 3-liter Whipple on a 6-liter? It depends on how much power you're trying to make. Those heads will support more power than you're making with a 6-liter in NA form. And so they're not limiting the 6-liter. And if you put a Whipple on it, you can turn the Whipple basically all the way up or as much as you want, whatever that supercharger will support. My guess is you're going to run into belt slippage and or inlet restrictions before you run into cylinder head problems. JA, you're here. Welcome. I went with the Hughes converter, Circle D guts. I've heard good things from both of those trans guys. Can you ever justify using lock timing? We do it all the time on the engine dyno. Say, for example, you're 100% duty cycle with your injectors at wide open throttle. Would you call it a shortcut to lock timing under load at wide open throttle? Is it ever applicable? I would never have lock timing on an EFI that I had the ability to control it, because the thing is not going to want and is not going to tolerate the same timing at every RPM at wide open throttle. And it's certainly not going to want it at different loads too. So that's a nice thing about fuel injection, is that you get to pick all of those points, because the timing is going to be less. It's going to want to be less at wide open throttle at 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 RPM before the torque peak than it is at the horsepower peak. Finally dug my Windsor block out of the corner at the machine shop. Going to be a 408. That's good. Let's see. Mercedes-Benz. Yeah, Michael, I don't do transmission stuff. So that if you ask me a question about something that the channel is not about, then there's a good chance I won't know about what that is. Truck Norris Tahoe is done. It runs good. Nice. First LS. Great. Congratulations, man. How did you get on running B-series stuff on the dyno, since they run counterclockwise? Are the dynos multi-directional? They were. The 901 would go both ways because it was a straight vane impeller. And so all we had to do is switch the dog bone to the other side and it would spin in both directions. We had an adapter for the dyno to mount the Honda on there, and all of it worked out good. They no longer have the 901. They only have 902s, and now they're going to a power mark, I think. And so we can't run reverse rotation Hondas on there. Switzerland's in the house. Nice. For the perfect cam for drift and other upgrades, I don't know a lot about what cam needs to be run for drift cars. Like I said, I don't have any data, any data logging from runs where I don't really understand everything that they're doing with those. My guess is it's going to be comparable to just making power with an LS motor the same way that we always have, but I don't know that for sure. But I think that Brian Tooley had, and other guys too, probably have drift cams. Richard, is anything can be done for a Ford 6.8 V10? Truck is a 2000, similar for a 543 valve. Is that 2000? Is that a 3 valve or is it a 2 valve? Because they made both of those, right? Too bad they didn't make a 4 valve version of that. Are there any cams worth getting? I don't know anybody that makes cam like off the shelf cams for those. Some people have done custom ones or regrinds on them, but I don't think that that's what you'd want for towing. I would think tune and long tube header and maybe an air intake for that. Doing a 441 LS with Dart Pro 1 heads. I've run Dart Pro 1 heads, but a long time ago, so I don't know if they've changed. They should be able to give you the flow numbers so you know how much. Just take the peak flow number and double it, and that will give you an idea on how much power they can support. Richard, last night was busy. Sergeant, I answered your question about the complete junkyard 8.1. I don't know if that's a good deal or not. I don't have any idea what they sell for. And a lot of times the yards, especially anymore, they sell that stuff separately. Some places, like if you go, what you should do is look online for 8.1s, for pull out 8.1s, and see what they are. I know if you can go, I mean, having one at a local yard, you have to also consider the shipping, but take a look around, do a search for them. There's should be lots of companies that have these motors, and just price it and see what's going on. 2 valve on the V10 in 2000. So the later ones were 3 valves. Richard, tell us more about the cylinder scallops, like the big block Chevy. I want to do that on the 4853 small bore stuff because I want to put the rec port heads on it. But the factory 396 had that, and other applications too. I think that this Pontiac 350 that I have probably has that as well. Thanks. Do you think ARP bolts in the rods are worth it because we can only drive 6.2s in 6.2 liter into the race series? I haven't ever put rod bolts in any LS that I've ever done. $750 Holly or Edelbach. Have both, but haven't decided. Well, if you have both, it's pretty easy for you to try both of them. Sleeper, you're going to go back and watch the beginning. The beginning was more about Bonneville than it was about autocrossing. And quite honestly, I don't think you should be concerned with first gear because I don't ever remember driving in an autocross course, which I've done a few. I don't ever remember using first gear except at the start. Have you run Texas Speed Bald Eagle Cam? I have not. For towing, how much does cubic inches affect mileage? It makes it worse, but I don't know. I don't know if you're asking about a specific rate per displacement, I don't know what that is. 8.1s are 300 at LKQ pick apart, are they? Daryl, you want a 1991 Marble Cyclone? It's 2 a.m. there? Man, you guys are hardcore. Rhode Island Junkyard sell a 5.3 LS with everything for $450. That's a good deal. 2010 4.8 liter. Is it worth pulling to sell or let it go to the crusher? I would always take the motors out if you're just going to crush the rest of the car. Or can you take the motor out and then sell the car? Oh, only the trucks got the 3Vs in 2005. Excursion's always got the two valve stuff. The 2V high performance unit. I still want to run one of those with turbos on it. Twin turbo V10. I have an 09 255.4. Any cams for torque? I think every cam that you put in there is not going to make as much low speed torque as the stock cams do. The 262 cams are the only small cams that I've run in those two valve motors. Well, no, I take that back. I've run all of the cams for the two valve stuff, but the smallest ones are the only ones I would recommend for any kind of daily driver. Parker, you want to run your factory DZ carb on it? If you have a factory DZ carb, you should go put that in a vault because those things are worth real money. I have a Blazer Extreme. Is it better to small block swap or LS swap? Got to do the thing that speaks to you, man. Either one of those work. Yeah, I don't. First gear is not. We don't even when I was road racing. We were doing World Challenge and Bridgestone Supercar and stuff. I never considered first gear anything other than like the start. And even then, we did standing starts and rolling starts, and it just never. First gear was never part of the equation. Wide open throttle box to keep turbo spinning plus no lift shift. Is there a better way? A better way to do what? What is it? Why are you trying to keep the turbo spinning? What application are you wanting to have? Like, why are you trying to maximize that? I just wonder what you're doing. I would love to see Holley EFI port injection on an air-cooled VW. We've run fuel injection on Volkswagens before. In fact, we ran stack injection. They looked like Weber's, but they were actually fuel injectors, and it worked very, very well. Richard, did you go to school for this? No, I have a degree, but it's not in automotive stuff. That's a 3-valve 5.4. Oh, a 3-valve 5.4. Okay, I've run a couple of 3-valve cams, but our problem is when we ran them, I wasn't able to run them with variable cam working. We just had a fixed cam position. And so it's not really a test. I mean, much as I would want there to be power or to tell you that there is, it's not really a good test because we didn't run the factory VVT. So I don't know what the curve looked like there. And then we were never to compare it to another one that had a good curve. So it was really kind of a waste of time. Isn't the rule of speed a wind resistance that every time you double your speed, you quadruple the air you have to displace aerodynamically? There's a much easier formula. If you have a 25% increase in speed, you have to have 100% increase in power. It's just easier for me. It's easier for me to like equate those things. Davis, you're wanting to stop lag? What I'm asking is, are you road racing or what is it you're trying to do where you're trying to stop lag? Sergeant, yeah, I have an advertising degree, marketing. Sleeper, is this car a V8? because you might be not worried about the right thing even in second gear here. Or do you have traction for the thing that you're trying to do here? 2 more minutes. We didn't even have a poll today. Let's see. We'll have to have a poll for tonight. Okay, so guys, throw some poll ideas out for me today, for tonight, for the 7 o'clock channel. What should the poll be? Well, 302, aluminum heads, cam, single plane. So you probably don't have lots of torque down low anyways, right? So I would put more gearing in it. It doesn't have to be top speed related. The poll could be anything. Check out the anti-lag stuff that like the catfish cars did and stuff. Back in the GTP cars. They did some cool stuff. Else building for the average guy is easy or hard. It's very easy. It's like anything else that you do. The first time that you do drywall, or the first time that you paint something, the first time that you do anything, you just try it. And now with the internet, there's so many videos that you can watch that tell you what to do and what not to do, that you should be fairly good at it. But even if you make a mistake your first time, that's what experience is. We've all made mistakes. I've made lots of them. So just don't be worried about making a mistake. You don't have to, as a first time guy, you don't have to have the results that a guy that's done it 100 times has. That's not the way the world works. So the poll is, when will Richard build a 5.3? But I can't. It has to be a yes or no question. Poll, will internal combustion engines be around in automobiles in 40 years? No, speed antiquities. The question is good, if only because people ask me that kind of stuff all the time. Well, should I just use, should I de-stroke it and run more RPM? And there's not these kinds of questions, which I get all the time. There's not a definitive answer. People want that. They want it to be a black and white thing, and it's not. It's always a gray area. The answer is always, it depends. Is an LS book in the works? I have two of them, 2 or 3 of them done already, so I'm not doing another one of those. Would an electric motor be a good idea to drive pulleys on a motor to gain horsepower? Yeah, you can do that. It's a hybrid drive. It definitely works. Or occurs kinetic energy recovery. Are combustion chamber shape, is combustion chamber shape critical? The answer to that is yes. Have you seen an LS6 with floating Gen 4 rods? I haven't taken very many of those apart, because that's like, especially back in the day when those would have been around, those would have been expensive motors. Learning is easier on junkyard parts versus brand new expensive stuff, which you cannot afford to make mistakes on. The poll should Richard buy a two-wheel drive truck or change his trans to a two-wheel drive deal? Did David Freiberger waste his money on a new Challenger? That you got to get what speaks to you, man. That's definitely a cool car. I think the cooler thing is that he can afford to buy a new Challenger. What's involved in doing a big bore on an LS6 block? You could sleeve it and get a big bore. You definitely do that. I've done that before where we made a 468 out of it. But I need to get going. I've got people at the door. So I will see you guys all tonight. Thank you guys all for being here. Remember to put up the comments for the poll for tonight. I will see you guys all later.